Welcome to the next part of the book, Hyperfocus: How to Work Less and Achieve More by Chris Bailey. Part 2, Scatterfocus. Chapter 6, Your Brain's Hidden Creative Mode. The second part of this book is devoted to the power of mind wandering and directing your attention inward. Yes, you heard that right. After encouraging you in the first part of the book to rid yourself of the style of thinking, I am about to explain the strength of mind wandering. Part of its bad reputation is warranted. When our intention is so focused, daydreaming can destroy our productivity. But daydreaming is immensely potent when our internal solve problem. Think more creatively, brainstorm new idea, or recharge. As far as boosting our creativity is concerned, mind wandering is in the league of its own. Think back to your last creative insight. Chances are you were not hyper focusing on one thing. In fact, you probably were not focused on much at all. You may have been taking an extra long shower, having a walk during lunch break, visiting a museum, reading a book, or relaxing on bench with drink or two. Maybe you were sipping your morning coffee. Then, like a flash of lightning, a brilliant idea struck out of nowhere. Your brain mysteriously chose this moment when you were resting and recharging to connect a few of the constellation of dots. Let's consider a dot to be any idea or a piece of information you remember swirling in your head. Just as hyperfocus is your brain's most productive mode, scatterfocus is most creative. Entering scatterfocus mode is easy. You simply let your mind be. Just as you hyperfocus by intentionally directing your attention toward the one thing, you scatterfocus by deliberately letting your mind wander. You enter this mode whenever you leave intentional space free around what you are doing in the moment, whether going for a run, biking, or investing time in anything that doesn't consume your full attentional space. When it comes to productivity and creativity, scatter focus enables you to do three powerful things at once. First, as I will discuss in this chapter, it allows you to set intentional and plan for the future. It's impossible to set future intentions when you are immersed in the present. By stepping back and directing your intention inward, you are able to switch off autopilot and consider what to do next. Your brain automatically plans for the future when you rest. You just need to give it a space and time to do so. Second, scatter focus lets you recharge. Focusing on tasks all the consume good deals of mental energy. Even when you are managing and defending your intentional space using the tactics set out in part 1. Scatter focus replenish that supply so you can focus for longer. Third, scatter focus forcefully creative. The mode helps you to connect all old idea and create new ones. Floats incubating thoughts to the surface of your attentional space and lets you piece together solution to problems. Scattering your attention and focusing on nothing in particular supercharge the dot connecting power of your brain. The more creative your job or the project requires, the more you should deliberately deploy scatter focus. Why we were averse to scatter focus? Despite the productive and creative benefit of scatter focus, most of us are somewhat hesitate to engage in this mode. While it's easy to get excited about becoming highly productive and hyper focused, scattering our attention is less exciting, at least on the surface. When we were surrounded by so many novel and stimulating objects of attention, most of us don't want to be left alone with our thoughts. In one recent survey, 83% of Americans responded that they did not spend any time somewhere relaxing or thinking in the 24-hour period before they were survived. Another study sought to measure exactly how resistant participants were so mind wandering. In first stage of the study, research attached two shocks elrode into participant, ankle zapped them, and then asked how much participant would pay or not receive shock again. Around three quarter of the group agreed they did not pay not to receive the shock again. In the second stage, participants were left alone with their thoughts for the 15 minutes. The research kept the electrode on during that time, on the off chance anyone wanted to shock himself again, saving himself from his own thought. This is where the study gets interesting and somewhat sad. A full 71% of the men in the study choose to self administration and electric shock when left alone with their thoughts. Women fared better, only 26% choose to shock themselves again. This pattern held true regardless of age, education, economic status, and distraction level of the participant. The results are especially depressing when you consider that research allow participants to proceed to the second stage only if they agreed to pay, not receive shock again. Anyone who did not mind the shocks were rejected. If you read a lot of books like this, you are probably familiar with the concept that our brains are wired for the survival and reproduction, not to do knowledge work day in day out. We focus on certain object of the attention by default, and doing so is what allowed the human species to survive. We have already discussed the first type of object of attention that draw us in, anything that's novel. This is what makes our smartphone and other devices so enticing. While we find that novel tasks like writing a report boring, regardless of how much they lead us to accomplish, we are also more likely to focus on anything that is pleasurable or threatening. This is where the survival instinct kick in. Pleasures like sex and overreacting have enabled us to reproduce and store fats for when food inevitably becomes scarce. Focusing on threat is our environment, like snake slitting nearby as early ancestor built a fire, enable us to live another day. We have crafted the world around us to cater this craving for novel, pleasurable, and threatening objects of attention. Consider this the next time you turn on TV and open YouTube, read the new website, or check social media. These outlets provide steady fix of all three. Today, the balance of these three objects of attention has been tipped. We are continually surrounded by the novel distraction. Pleasures are plentiful and legitimate threats are few and far between. The wiring in our brain that our evolutionary past leads us store sugar and have sex as the survival mechanism now leads us to overindulge in fast food and pornography. Continually scanning for threat is what compels us to dwell on the one negative email or overthinking a careless offhand comment from our boss. What once aid our chances survival now sabotage our productivity and creativity in the modern world. It makes us most urgent tasks feel a lot more important than they actually are. We are also prone to falling prey to what's novel, pleasurable, and threatening when we let our mind wander and turn our attention inward. Our greatest threat, worries, and fear no longer reside in our external environment but within the depth of our own consciousness. When our mind wanders to slip into the pattern of ruminating on the stupid things we have said, the argument we have won and lost, and worries about work and money. This is also true of pleasurable thoughts. We daydream of memorable meals, recall memories from the great vacation, or fantasize about how great we did feel if we had come up with a witty retort to something said earlier. The next time you meditate, pay attention to how your mind is naturally drawn to the threat, pleasure, and novel idea floating in your head. But in practice, we don't actually experience negative mind wandering episode that often. Our mind primarily wander to the negative when we are thinking about the past. But we wander to the past just 12% of the time. The remainder is spent thinking about the present and the future, which makes scatter focus remarkably productive. While our evolutionary history leads us to think about the novel and negative, it has also wired our brain for the profound creativity. Whenever we turn our attention inward, we did argue that our ability to do so is practically a superpower. Compared with our mammals, our ability to think about something that's not immediately in front of us is fairly unique. It affords us the ability to plan for the future, learn from the past, and have a daydreaming that spawn remarkably insight. It helps us search inward for the solution to external situation, whether we are solving a math problem or telling the server how we usually take our eggs. Most remarkable scatter focus enable us to step back from life and to work live more intentionally. Oh, the places our mind goes. In writing hyperfocus, I have had opportunity to read hundred, if not thousand, of studies related to the attentional management. Of all the research I encountered, my absolute favorite study book at where our mind goes when it wanders. It was conducted by the Benjamin Baird and Jonathan Scholar from the University of California at Santa Barbara and Jonathan Smallwood from the University of Work. Their work is absolutely fascinating and provides scientific evidences for what makes the scatter focus so fruitful. When your mind wanders, it visits three main places: the past, the present, and the future. This is precisely why scattering our attention allow you creative to flourish as you travel through the time and connect what you are learned to what you are doing or what you want to achieve. This enables you to work with a greater intention as you consider your future and think about what you should be doing in the present to make it reality. Even though we spend just 12% of our scatter focus time thinking about the past, we are more likely to remember these thoughts episode compared with when we think about the present or future. Our mind is weird to not only perceive but also remember threats like one negative email that we cannot forget. On some level, these past thoughts speak to the power of scatter focus. When we daydream, we often experience our thought as if they were real. Cringe-worthy memories strike from out of the blue, hijack our attention, and leads us to tense up the stupid stuff we have said and done. In addition to thinking about the past, our mind wanders to the present 28% of the time. While we are not moving our work forward during this wandering, they can still be productive. Thinking abstractly about what's in front of us lets us consider alternate approach to the problem we are facing, like how we can best approach an awkward conversation to tell a coworker that he should be wearing deodorant. The wandering thoughts about what we are currently working on usually proves to be fairly productive. We need to reflect on our task in order to work more deliberately. Neurologically speaking, it's important to both focus on something and reflect on that thing at the same time. This makes entire scatter focus critical. Without entering scatter focus mode, you never think about the future. It is only once you step back from writing an email, drafting a paper, or planning your budget that you can consider alternative approach to the task. Finally, our mind wanders to think about the future 48% of the time, more than our past and present thinking combined. We usually think about the immediate future. 44% of our future thoughts concern a time later, same day, and 40% tomorrow. Most of this time is spent planning. Because of this, scatter focus enable us to act more intelligently and more intentionally. Every moment of our life is like chosen to your own adventure story, continually offering different options that allow us to define the future path. Scatter focus lets us better image this path. Should we talk to the good looking person sitting alone across the coffee shop? Should we accept the job offer? How would we order our egg. This mode also enables us to better weight the consequence of each decision and path. In thinking about the future, we flip off autopilot mode and have space to step back and consider how we want to act before our habit and routine make the decision for us. Research refers to our mind propensity to future wonder as our prospective bias. This tendency is what leads us to spend half of our scatter focus time planning. We spend hardly any time thinking about the future when we are focused, while in scatter focus mode, we are four times more likely to have these thoughts. Scatter focus lets us work more with greater intention because our mind automatically contrasts like the future we design against the present. We need to change to make that future reality. We consider our goal only about 4% of the time when we are immersed in what we are doing, while the scatter focus mode we think about the 26% of the time. The more time we spend scatter focusing between the tasks rather than indulging in the distraction, the more thoughtful and productive our actions are, as well as helping your plan for the future, recharge and connect idea. Research suggests that scatter focus also leads you to become more self-aware, incubate idea more deeply, remember and process idea and meaningful experience more effectively, reflects on the meaning of your experiences, show greater empathy and become more compassionate.